Hi everybody, and welcome back to the 15-minute or so no frills waffle free bedtime murder story. If you've been here before, thank you so much for returning. I really am chuffed, and if this is your first time here, I hope I can persuade you to return. All the waffle is at the end, so you can turn me off after the story or carry on listening to me talking a load of gobbledygook. Tonight's story is an horrific child killing, so it's not suitable for younger listeners or anyone who the details of this crime might upset. And with that, let's crack on. Tonight's story is about little Johnny Gill. Early on the morning of the 27th December 1888, 7-year-old John Gill, known as Johnny, kissed his mum goodbye and ran out of his house on Thorncliffe Road, Bradford. The milkman, 23-year-old William Barrett, hoisted him up onto his milk cart. Johnny turned and waved goodbye to his mum as he set off helping the milkman on his round. She never saw him alive again. Johnny was a good boy, so when he wasn't home by 11:30 a.m, already being he was 30 minutes later than he had ever been before, she began to wonder where he might be. As the hours went by, this turned to worry and eventually panic. She went herself searching the streets, even going to the milkman's house. He wasn't in, but his wife said John had been with her husband when he popped in for his breakfast. She went home to see if Johnny was there now, and while there, William Barrett, the milkman, came to the door and said, "Is John back?" "No," replied Mary Jane Gill. "When did you last see him?" The milkman said that John had left him one house before the end of his morning round, at about 8:30, saying he was going home for breakfast. Now, Mary Ann couldn't understand this. Why would he leave the round early? He usually had breakfast with Barrett and continued on the round with him, usually getting back about 11 a.m. Also, after completing his last delivery of the morning, he would have passed right outside their house, so he didn't need to walk home. And Barrett would have passed John before he got home, if indeed he was walking back. Barrett just shrugged his shoulders and walked off. But now Mary Ann knew she couldn't handle this alone and sent her daughters to fetch their father. Their father, Thomas, was on his cab at the cab stand, and he immediately headed for home. As soon as he saw the pain and anguish in his wife's face, he knew this was serious. They hunted everywhere until, finally exhausted, at 4 a.m. in the morning, they made their way to Bradford Town Hall to report a missing person to the police. The police duly took this serious, and they and the general public started the search. They found nothing at all. But then on Saturday the 29th of December, butcher's apprentice Joseph Burke, who was either 15 or 18 years old, whoever's report you listened to, went to his employer's stable at the back Mellor Street at 7 a.m. to clean it out. He hadn't been mucking out long when he saw what he thought was a parcel of clothing. He couldn't resist looking. He fetched a lantern to see better and instantly wished he hadn't. What he saw would be burnt into his mind for the rest of his life. He ran out of the stable into the road shouting, "The Ripper was here! The Ripper was here!" He managed to get 3 bakers to follow him back to the stable, and after seeing the horrific scene, they sent Joseph to find a policeman. PC Haig was only a couple of minutes away from the scene when Joseph found him and had the PC accompany him back to the stables. PC Haig removed the coat covering the bundle and saw to his horror a mutilated corpse. Even in the complete shock he was in, he knew not to disturb anything and sent one of the bakers to fetch his superiors from Town Hall. Straight away, Chief Detective Inspector Dobson went to the scene and then briefed Chief Constable Withers when he arrived with the police surgeon, Dr. Samuel Lodge. Dr. Lodge viewed the body and could not believe what he was seeing. The body was totally naked. The legs had been hacked off, with the thighs placed either side of the head. The feet were protruding behind the back. The ears had been removed, but apart from that, the face was untouched. There was a bit of shirting knotted around the neck. One of the braces was tied round the neck and legs, and the other around the trunk. The torso had been cut open from chin to the pubic area. The intestines were round the neck and the heart under the chin. The lungs were missing, and in their place was a pair of boots shoved into the open chest cavity. There were 2 puncture wounds to the chest. When the doctor turned the body over, he found the penis and anus had been carved out and were missing. The body was drained of all blood, but there was none at the crime scene. Also, there was no knife damage to the clothes, so the victim must have been naked when he was stabbed. A heartbroken Thomas had to go and identify his son at the morgue, and then had the terrible task of telling his wife their son was dead. Straight away, the milkman, William Barrett, became the prime suspect. Barrett claimed that John left him before he made his last delivery of the morning at 9 Walmer Villas. He jumped off the cart saying he was going home for breakfast, and the last he saw of him was about 8:30, sliding on ice with other youngsters. He then returned to the dairy, loaded up with milk, and carried on with his round. The police, though, had decided they had their man and arrested him. At the magistrates' hearing, the defence were able to say they had 27 witnesses who could put Barrett where he said he was. They found no blood on any of his clothing, although it had been recently laundered. There was no blood on his knife, hammer, tools, or any cloths taken from the stable. The magistrates deliberated and came back with the verdict of no prima facie. In other words, no evidence shown to incriminate this man, and that William Barrett had no case to answer and was free to go. The public in the courtroom exploded into applause and cheering. They believed he had been persecuted from the start. Barrett decided not to go home, but to go and stay with his in-laws in Connolly, approximately 15 miles away. Next was the inquest into Johnny's death, which was held by the coroner to investigate unexpected or suspicious deaths. The police, still believing they had had their man but had let him slip through their fingers, had now got some new witnesses of their own, who testified to seeing Barrett near the stables with a package in his outstretched arms. This time, the verdict is died by unlawful killing by William Barrett. So, all very confusing. We've had a magistrate's trial and Barrett has been found not guilty and is a free man. A few days later, an inquest and they have found him guilty. I believe that the law has now changed where the coroner does not have this power. But at the time, the police couldn't get their hands on the warrant fast enough. And Detective Inspector Dobson grabbed 2 of his best men and rushed off to the Midland station to get a train to Connolly. They arrived there around 10 p.m. and find the right cottage, which is conveniently just minutes from the station. To say Barrett's mother-in-law and wife are not happy to see them would be an understatement, but they finally let them in. Barrett was not home from work yet. Also, word travels fast and a mob started to arrive at the cottage. When Barrett arrived home from work half an hour later, he couldn't believe it when he saw the warrant. Things started to turn ugly with the mob until Dobson, in his booming voice, tells them to be off or he will arrest them all. Unbelievably, that worked. He allowed Barrett to eat his supper, then got one of his men to find a cab for the drive back because there was no way they were going to run the gauntlet to the train station. William Barrett was in Armley Prison until his trial on Tuesday the 12th of March 1889 in Leeds. He pleaded not guilty, and unbelievably the prosecution did not propose to call any evidence, so the jury were instructed to find him not guilty, and he was free again. So what happened to the witnesses who saw him carrying the package? I suppose we will never know. The murder was committed only a few weeks after Jack the Ripper had murdered Mary Kelly. In a lot of ways it was similar to Johnny's death, and also the police received letters supposedly from Jack to say he had recently been up to Bradford to rip a kid. But this seems unlikely. To travel 200 miles to kill a boy? It's not Jack the Ripper, is it? A lot of people believe Barrett got away with murder. There are reports that Johnny told his mother that the milkman had got fresh with him one time, and it was reported Barrett was furious that he had seen the milkman drunk on his round when he was supposed to be teetotal and had told people. He never helped search for Johnny, and this was supposedly his little friend. The murder did not seem to faze him at all at the time. He was still laughing, joking and singing as if nothing had happened. Afterwards, he seems to have lived a fairly good life, finishing up being a farm owner and a bailiff. As for Johnny's poor parents, Thomas died in 1909 at only 54 years old. Mary Ann visited Johnny's grave in the Windhill Cemetery every Saturday for 44 years until her death in 1932, aged 76, when she was buried in the same grave as her Thomas and little Johnny. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story, if I can say enjoy. I don't know about you, but I think William Barrett committed the perfect murder. I think he most probably was a psychopath and a paedophile, but that's just my opinion. It's the parents I really feel for. But there was one thing. I was talking to my dad about it and said I didn't understand how they let a 7-year-old go out on a milk round with a man they hardly knew. He said it was a different time. People didn't lock their doors or keep tabs on their kids. They felt safe, communities were very close, and they looked out for each other. He said that he was exactly the same. He went out with a milkman every morning on his cart at the age of 7 or 8, filled people's jugs up from the urn, didn't get paid, just went for the fun of it. Anyway, it's time for a bit of waffle. While researching this story, I came across the fantastic book Who Killed Little Johnny Gill by Catherine McMaster. This is the definitive book on this murder. But she's made it factional. It's like you're reading a story, but every fact of the case is in it. I got it on Kindle for about £3. That is an absolute bargain. It brought a tear to my eye. It's so well written. My podcast of the week, this week, is The Student's Verdict. I love this podcast. I've only just found it. So looking forward to binging on it, as I've only listened to 3 episodes so far. I love the stories and the research, and Emily tells them so well with a lovely voice, so please check her out. I recommend episode 16, I represented a serial killer, so please check her out. Also, I'd like to thank Jonathan Segev, as usual, for Cursed Lullaby, my intro music, and also thanks as always to the mistress of murder herself at the Right Shoe podcast, Debbie Q, for our great little chats. Special shout out to Murder, Mayhem and Meows. Looking forward to getting my sticker. I'll wear it with pride. Stay safe, everybody. And if you are in a country where bars are open and not in lockdown, please have a large rum and coke for me. If you like this story, please rate and review it. It really does help. And I really hope you will all be back next time. Remember, stay safe. Try not to let it make you as mad as a box of frogs. Good night.